Muy buenos días. Es un gusto recibirlos en esta emblemática sala que honra el nombre de Gilberto Bosques Saldívar, quien fuera profesor, legislador federal y diplomático, y que, como cónsul en Francia, durante la ocupación nazi, logró expedir más de 40,000 visas para salvar igual número de vidas. Lo mismo para españoles republicanos que huían de la dictadura franquista, como para los perseguidos políticos del nazismo de distintas nacionalidades.
This is an honor having you, all of you today. This room is named after Mr. Gilberto Bosques Saldívar, former public servant for Mexico, diplomat, and during the Nazi occupation, he was able to issue more than 40,000 visas for people that they were escaping of the horrors of the war.
Doy la bienvenida al honorable Chief Matthew, destacado líder indígena en Canadá y presidente del Fondo de Infraestructura Indígena.
Es un privilegio, honor recibir al jefe Matthew en este recinto legislativo. Perdón. No, so this is an honor having you in this honorable Chamber of Deputies. It's an honor having Chief Matthew, and it's a real honor for the parties present today.
Doy la bienvenida también a Mark Kelly, consejero del Fondo, a Daily Zurda, ejecutivo empresarial indígena de Canadá y socio directo del Fondo, y a los demás miembros de la delegación canadiense que hoy nos acompañan.
It's an honor also welcoming Mr. Mark Keeley, who is the head of the delegation, who is joining us today. Also Mr. Dale Suruga, who is a businessman, Canadian, and also First Nation person, indigenous, who is joining us today, and all the members of this delegation coming all over from Canada to Mexico.
Saludo también a Lucy Berro, consejera de la Embajada de Canadá en México.
También saludo a, also I'm greeting and also welcoming Lucy Berro, who is working for the Canadian Embassy in Mexico.
Y a Eugenio Morales, asesor principal para asuntos políticos y del Congreso de la Embajada de Canadá en México.
Also, I'm welcoming Eugenio Morales, who is an advisor for business and also business development from the Embassy of Canada in Mexico.
Me permito dar también la bienvenida y agradecer su amable presencia a mis compañeras diputadas y diputados que hoy nos acompañan y a los demás visitantes que nos honran con su presencia. Saludo al diputado Ildefonso Guajardo Villarreal, integrante de esta comisión y presidente del Grupo de Amistad México-Canadá.
I'm welcoming all the members of this Chamber of Deputies, congresswomen and congressmen who are joining us today. Also, I would like to salute Mr. Ildefonso Guajardo Villarreal, former Secretary of Economic Development in Mexico and also the head of the group Mexico-Canada Friendship.
Saludo también a la diputada Carmen Bautista, al diputado Miguel Ángel Torres, a la diputada Ana Laura Huerta y al diputado Mario Miguel Carrillo. Y saludo fundamentalmente al diputado Manuel Alejandro Robles Gómez, secretario de esta comisión y promotor y coordinador de esta visita. Ahora me permito dar la palabra al honorable Chief Matthew.
Now I would be pleased to give the floor to Mr. Matthew, Chief Matthew.
Muchas gracias por invitarme a esta honorable Cámara de Diputados. También quiero aprovechar esta oportunidad para presentarme. Soy indígena de la primera nación Simj en Canadá y de la tierra que todos compartimos. Tú y muchos millones de personas en esta gran isla Tortuga, donde estamos unidos en América del Norte. My people, indigenous people, have lived from Arctic Ocean in the north of Canada to Tierra del Fuego at the tip of South America for thousands of years. And although we are separated by many thousands of kilometers, we are by what my ancestors call Turtle Island, or as you know it, North America. First contact from Europe into the Americas came in the 1400s, and although those that came here from Europe may have changed the way my people live today, their presence has influenced much of the culture on Turtle Island. However, our indigenous oral tradition, the tradition of my ancestors and indigenous peoples here in Mexico, has prevailed for thousands of years and literally bonds indigenous peoples together, even in different languages. My comments today hope to inspire some thinking on our collective futures and about a new way of doing business between nations. As an indigenous business leader, my comments will frame how I envision how our indigenous people in Canada and Mexico can transfer talent and knowledge as well as create wealth for all. It is for this reason that our fund, the Indigenous Critical Infrastructure Fund, or ICIF, will look to explore the possibility of a larger program for more people in Mexico to come to Canada and vice versa. But this is just a start. Allow me to provide some context on how this kind of a program has become viable. When Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and his government were elected in 2015, he outlined the overarching goal of rebuilding Canada for the 21st century. More importantly, he expressed his personal commitment to bringing new leadership and a new tone to Ottawa when it comes to nation relations, specifically stating that no relationship is more important to me and to Canada than the one with Indigenous peoples. It is time for a renewed nation-to-nation relationship with Indigenous peoples based on recognition of rights, respect, cooperation, and partnership. Thank you, Mr. Robles, for your gracious introduction. Let me say at the outset how humbled I am to be here to address you and your colleagues. Before I begin my remarks, I want a moment to think about Ukraine and what's happening there. I also want to thank Mexico for its support for Indigenous peoples. Your government and you as elected officials have made it clear that you support the sovereignty of Indigenous peoples in your land and across the world. I want to begin a few words in my language as well. Keith Matthew and Squest. I said in my language, which is Sahwepmshin, the language of my people, hello, my relatives. It's good to be here today. And I'll get back to my prepared speech. And since 2015, Indigenous people across Canada have witnessed a significant step forward in the tenor of relations with the federal government and the manner in which public policy is crafted. A recent example is the 2021 federal budget, which provided a measure of hope with a promise to spend $6 billion on infrastructure improvements in Indigenous communities. This was part of a broader 5-year, $18 billion spending pledge to improve socioeconomic outcomes among Indigenous populations over 5 years. Yet, when it comes to the ability of Canada's Indigenous peoples to independently chart a new course towards the future by building a vital infrastructure, the devil is in the details. The fact is, there is an estimated $30 billion shortfall between essential infrastructure available for Indigenous communities than what is available to other Canadians. What is more devastating than this deficit, however, is the fact that Indigenous communities across Canada face immense barriers to accessing capital and the financial tools necessary to improve prospects to achieve economic and social prosperity. In 2017, the National Aboriginal Economic Development Board in Canada commissioned a report that determined that the gap between Indigenous people and other Canadians is widening every year. The research found that an additional $83.3 billion in capital is needed to fuel an Indigenous economy operating at the same level as mainstream Canada. Indigenous governing bodies, like my nation and Simk First Nation, are restricted in our ability to raise revenue due to having significantly less taxation powers than other levels of government in Canada. We are also limited by legislation which disallows Indigenous ownership on our reserve lands, which prevents its use as collateral. In fact, in the eyes of my country, I am unfortunately a ward of the government. The lack of basic infrastructure in certain Indigenous jurisdictions, things like paved roads, fire services, water and sewage systems, and reliable internet access, often act as a deterrent for larger scale private sector investment. And as a result, when it comes to opportunities for Indigenous peoples to become equity partners in the development of major infrastructure, our options have traditionally been limited to high interest, predatory lending, time-limited funding streams, and or inflexible short-term loan arrangements. This is a significant part of the impetus behind our creation of the Indigenous Critical Infrastructure Fund. Our vision is guided by the UN Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, or UNDRIP, which provides a broad mandate from which to begin reconciliation efforts and initiatives for Indigenous peoples around the world. In Canada, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission has embraced this framework to build a new era of recognition for cultural identity, respect for traditional ways of life, unqualified rights to traditional lands, and the ability for self-governance and self-determination. The ICIF represents the evolution of global efforts towards reconciliation by focusing on economic reconciliation. The fund is stewarded and managed by some of Canada's most consequential Indigenous leaders and is aiming to provide an economic lever to give Indigenous peoples across the globe power of assertion. For ICIF to be successful, we must be disciplined. We must demonstrate to those who will subscribe to our fund that we are responsible stewards of their money. We will deliver good business practices, and more importantly, we will incorporate our values with regards to Mother Earth into everything we engage in. This criteria is incorporated into the selection of the investments we make. We do this as a matter of course rather than singular consideration of profitability and or risk presented by each respective opportunity. Because of UNDRIP, we are being held to a higher standard, and rightfully so. As such, we have chosen a board, a management team, and an advisory council that is second to none. Many of these individuals have accompanied me on this visit to Mexico, and I am grateful to them for their dedication and expertise. We aspire to provide options for those considering subscribing to our fund. We strive to offer good returns, and what is more important is the quality of investments we will embrace, and that the outcome of the investments, its profits, go directly to Indigenous peoples globally. This is our way of asserting, and let me offer a tangible example. In most private equity funds, the fund operators enjoy a 2% management fee and 20% of the proceeds. This is the common vehicle for fund managers to generate enormous wealth for themselves. We will not do this. In fact, my board and I have committed to channeling any and all profits into a unique sub-fund, the Indigenous Heritage Foundation, or IHF. This will be a global fund, meaning that it will direct funds to Indigenous peoples everywhere. The ICIF's vision of Indigenous assertion of not only our rights, but our solidarity with other Indigenous peoples represents a path to becoming a strategic equity partners within large long-term investment opportunities. In Canada, that means the ICIF is looking to break through the long-standing obstacles to Indigenous-owned businesses have faced when attempting to direct commercial terms and modern-day governance regimes. Our Indigenous population is one of the youngest in terms of demographics in Canada, and post-secondary enrollment for our young people is at record levels. Further, the rate of these graduates coming back into Indigenous communities and business ventures to contribute towards a more prosperous future has never been higher. Indigenous peoples are also exercising their rights over land and revenue like never before, and Canada's rich resource landscape is forever intertwined with the traditional territories of my peoples, from the Atlantic to the Pacific to the Arctic coasts. The ICIF follows two basic tenets: giving voice to and creating wealth for Indigenous peoples. How do we plan to do this? Through the power of economic development, autonomy, and equity ownership. We are no longer interested in the limitations of impact and benefit agreements that ultimately leave Indigenous peoples as passive bystanders to these projects that surround and intimately impact our communities. The ICIF recognizes that in spite of our unique identities and cultural differences, Indigenous peoples across the globe, including here in Mexico, have commonality in the fight to protect our rights, to strive for recognition, and to preserve our cultural identities. We will implement a new measure of control over our lands and, more importantly, facilitate opportunities and a standard of living that is always improving for future generations. To these ends, the power of economic reconciliation and empowered voices based on equity and partnership are the keys to unlocking the potential of more than 370 million Indigenous people spread across 70 countries globally, including 16.5 million here in Mexico. This is particularly relevant in your country's efforts to create economic prosperity for all, and I applaud your government for this. I will. The program for the development of Istmo of Tehuantepec is an endeavor Thank you. Is an endeavor that dates back centuries to develop trading routes, which much like what our ancestors did thousands of years ago. Thank you. The Mexican government's efforts to create an interoceanic multimodal trade corridor is absolutely about promoting a new model of economic growth as sustainably as possible. But it is more than that. It is a means to reinforce and empower Indigenous peoples and their traditional lands that span the proposed 300-kilometer corridor. I'm aware that there have been challenges with regards to some of the Indigenous nations and their buy-in for the project as work has begun over the past few years. And while I cannot claim to know all of the issues that surround the construction of Ferrocarril del Istmo de Tehuantepec Railroad, I'm doing my best. I might offer some potential insight into the 12 Indigenous nations spread across 79 municipalities when it comes to creating a collaborative and prosperous future for everyone. Efforts to facilitate Indigenous adoption and partnership in this ambitious initiative represents a paradigm shift that mimics our fund's vision for Indigenous economic reconciliation. The fears of Indigenous peoples over the loss of traditional ways of life, access to traditional lands, or mitigation of potential health risks takes on a far different tone when equity partnership and decision-making influence are the parameters from which discussions originate. And as a result, the discussions I want to encourage while I'm here in Mexico are welcoming to any initiative that increases wealth and gives voice to Mexico's Indigenous populations. I'm aware that there are Mexican projects underway that embody this vision for Indigenous peoples. The hospital project in Chetumal, developed by a Canadian company with principals Ernesto Baez and Mark Keeley of BVE and K&A respectively, here as part of my delegation is just one example. When this project is completed, it will offer access and opportunity to patients across the southwest of Mexico, and particularly Indigenous peoples in the Zona Maya of Yucatan Peninsula. This represents the opportunity associated with education and, in turn, the potential for work exchanges to work and train in Canada. As I noted at the outset of my remarks, if indeed there are chances for migrant workers from Mexico to come to Canada, or for Canadians to come here to Mexico, we will explore them in partnership between our two countries. More importantly, my team and I are here in Mexico to explore initiatives that cater to the traditional and common values of Indigenous people, projects that embrace sustainable solutions, integrated social context. In closing, everything I have highlighted today is not only achievable, but also essential for the relationship that governments in Canada and Mexico have with Indigenous peoples. Why? Because of the interest in this chamber and across the Mexican government in working together. There is fertile ground here upon which we can build historic collaboration, and I believe the delegation that the Indigenous Critical Infrastructure Fund has assembled for this trip is the right partners for our collective success. The ICIF is unique because we are 100% Indigenous owned and global in our perspective and aspirations for all Indigenous peoples. In other words, we have the power to attract global attention for this important new direction in the future of the world's Indigenous populations. I look forward to the future ongoing opportunities to share more of our vision, and I extend to everyone our invitation to be our guests in our part of Turtle Island in the very near future. Gracias. And in the words of my people, we don't have a word for goodbye. So we say, yeah. We say we'll see you again soon. Gracias.
Nuestro amigo coordinador Ignacio Mier ofrece una disculpa, sin embargo, quiere compartir unas palabras con ustedes. Está el diputado Mario Carrillo, que los dará en su lugar. ¿Vale? Exacto. El diputado Carrillo está acá. Entonces, pero traduces, ¿no?
Sí, yo voy traduciendo, sin ningún problema. Encantado la vida.
Bueno, la primera parte, la bienvenida la hago en inglés. So, Dr. Matthew Kuhn, Chief Matthew, welcome to Mexico. From our leader, Deputy Ignacio Mier Velasco. We recognize your leadership and all the work that you have done in Canadian soil. And between the relationships of the Canadian government with the indigenous people, so important to the history of the country. And also the hard work that you have been doing with the environment and the sustainable infrastructure and the social work that you have done. And also all the productivity or the activity in the energy sector, which right now we are discussing right now here in Mexico, our laws concerning energy. So this is the message of the Deputy Ignacio Mier Velasco. Welcome to Mexico. Welcome all of your team from Canada, and we are willing to work with you with all and with your experiences, so we can enrich our own work here in Mexico. Thank you very much.
No, que
Pay attention.
es un privilegio. Jefe Matthew, el mensaje en español, en una síntesis, si me lo permiten, es un verdadero privilegio y reconocemos el trabajo que se ha realizado por parte de las comunidades indígenas en Canadá. Se celebra los resultados que ha habido en temas esenciales. Al día de hoy, esta honorable Cámara de Diputados está trabajando en una iniciativa en tema energético, y el mensaje del señor diputado, amablemente compartido por nuestro compañero, es de que está abierto y dispuesto el camino para trabajar de manera conjunta.
Good job, good job. El turno es nos ha pedido compartir el mensaje el consejero del Fondo, que es Mike Hill. Y una vez que nos comparta el mensaje Mike Hill, va a tomar la palabra los diputados, encabezando la lista, y Ildefonso Guajardo, y los que me vayan diciendo de los diputados. ¿Vale? Ok, go ahead, Mike.
Mark, the floor is yours.
Me?
Yes.
No, I heard my name, but I didn't think I had to speak. Señor Robles, muchas gracias por todo. Tú eres un persona increíble. Bienvenidos a Canadá, Ancora. Okay, please. For everybody here, I'm going to speak in English, pero yo hablo español. But I want to speak because nada persona en Canadá speaks Spanish. Sorry. He will translate. Can you speak Spanish?
I will try. Voy a tratar.
Chief, I want to say that you did a remarkable job. Your words are, in the words of Guillermo Cusrico, sensacional. They were very, very effective. For all of you here in Mexico, the indigenous people in Canada are sovereign. They are really asserting right now. And I look at not only Chief Matthew, but I look at very consequential indigenous leaders like Frank Bush, who's here. I'm very proud that you're here, Frank. He's very notable in Canada. Dale Saruda, who has an incredible business acumen, and he's here too from his nation in Canada. I'm delighted that you made this trip with us. And for my business associates here, for Rob Francis, and for Senguian, and for Ernesto Baez, who's my brother-in-arms in Mexico, I want to thank you for coming here too. I particularly want to thank Guillermo Cruz Rico. Guillermo is very important in Canada because you came to Canada at the right time, and we're grateful for you here. I want to also thank my colleagues from the Embassy of Canada, without whom I think a lot of this could not have been possible. So thank you, Lucy, and thank you, thank you, everybody. Our visit here is important because we're trying to bridge the gap between, as the chief had said, the indigenous peoples throughout Turtle Island. There is no border between Canada, the United States, and Mexico for indigenous people. None. And as a consequence, we think that there is huge opportunity for our fund, the Indigenous Critical Infrastructure Fund, to do what Chief Matthew had said, to look, Marion, in terms of what we're talking about in the context of energy. And Dale is here. He's an expert in energy, and I think we should have a discussion with him, sir. And also on things like healthcare with Ernesto and myself, and on other areas too. We're just delighted. We have a lot of work to do together. I'm grateful too that you helped negotiate a good deal. It's a very good deal, sir, between Canada, Mexico, and the United States for our three countries. And you were on TV a lot, and you kept your cool. And I'm really grateful for Mexico for what you did. So thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for having us here. We are delighted to be here. And yes, I look forward to more and more pleasurable experiences while we're here in business and otherwise. Thank you.
Quiero agradecer al jefe Matthew por todo su trabajo que ha realizado y por su participación en el fondo. Quiero agradecer a todos y cada uno de los miembros de la delegación que nos acompañan el día de hoy, mencionando a Frank Bush, que es parte del fondo, también Del Surura, Sangui, Rob Francis, Roberto, también se agradeció a su amigo y servidor. Lo más importante es de que quiero agradecer a Mark Keeley, al señor diputado Ildefonso Guajardo por su gran trabajo que realizó en la negociación del Tratado de Libre Comercio. Hay mucho trabajo que hacer, y también agradecer particularmente a esta comisión por abrirnos las puertas, y al diputado Robles, que sin su invaluable participación y apoyo este encuentro no sería posible.
Tenemos en la lista para responder nuestro amigo el diputado Ildefonso Guajardo, y empezamos con él.
Por favor, sí.
Te faltó decir que dijo que salía mucho en la televisión y que no perdía el cool. Bueno, primero agradecerle al presidente de la Comisión de Relaciones Exteriores. I want to thank the president of the Foreign Affairs Committee of this chamber for the invitation, to welcome you and basically Chief Matthew for sharing with us a very, very important historic trend of how the indigenous community of Canada has evolved to be part of a very important national agenda. I was definitely a witness of the relevance that your government gave to your community and your people. On the first negotiating meeting that we had in Canada, after meeting in Washington, we started the first dinner with guests from your community. So Prime Minister Trudeau and Chrystia Freeland were extremely focused on the relevance that this agreement will bring everybody on board. That's the only way trade agreements will have any benefits, when the whole community is involved in the process. Now, let me also share with you what are our worries in terms of indigenous communities in Mexico. We believe that in our process, historic process, there have been a lot of, we say it in Spanish, usos y costumbres, that in the 21st century, some of them can be translated sometimes in violations of rights of women, in violations of some rights that will help the community develop. We have a very close friend, a congresswoman from the state of Oaxaca, that just wrote a book. She was the first indigenous woman to try to be mayor of her town. And she won the election, but the community never allowed her to take possession of that election. Therefore, we have a tremendous challenge on how the state of law and the rights of everybody involved have to be protected. And I'm sure that in a country like Canada, with a very progressive agenda, we can learn a lot of things on how to really protecting the rights of indigenous communities, help them to evolve to the 21st century, looking forward to really protect the basic rights of the community. Now, that being said, which can be a very important part of the agenda we can build together for a North American agenda of indigenous communities, it will be also very relevant that you will take note that the process of building the nation was a bit different between the US, Canada, and Mexico. In Mexico, we are highly fortunate, most of us, to have in our ADN some indigenous heritage. And therefore, that gives us a different perspective of the inclusion of indigenous community in our future. Right after this meeting, that I'm very honored to be part of, I will join the Economic Commission. And one of the initiatives that we'll be voting today is to make visible the policy programs towards indigenous people in economic development. And on that front, we have a saying in Mexico that the only way you can show love is through the budget. If there is not budget, there is no love. And therefore, we will be very strongly fighting the party that I'm a member of, to fight for a much stronger budget for minorities in this country and for the indigenous population. And we hope our friends from Morena will join in that agenda to really build love through the budget. So welcome to Mexico, and I will be willing to be part of this agenda, and I'm sure that when the Mexico-Canada group organize our first trip to Ottawa, we'll be very much interested that you will receive us in your community, and we will be looking forward to build a very strong agenda in the parliamentarian group in Canada, given the fact that my friend Chrystia Freeland today, I believe, is a very well-regarded politician in Canada, and I hope that we'll be building a strong agenda with her. Thank you.
Por favor, Guillermo, en español.
I can correct it.
Una corrección de rata, se me olvidó decir que el señor diputado se ve muy bien en televisión, como bien lo mencionaba. El señor diputado menciona que tuvo la oportunidad de vivir de primera mano la negociación del Tratado de Libre Comercio. Fue el jefe de la delegación mexicana en la negociación. Y por esa circunstancia, en la primera reunión que se tuvo en Ottawa con el señor primer ministro y con la entonces ministra de Finanzas, pues, de Relaciones Exteriores, había un interés particular en que las comunidades indígenas canadienses y en particular de las regiones de Norteamérica se vieran beneficiadas de este acuerdo. El señor diputado también nos menciona de que aquí en México tenemos un dicho: si no hay presupuesto no hay amor, y por esa circunstancia considera él que desde su trinchera y desde su grupo parlamentario, el día de hoy que van a tener participación en una comisión de desarrollo económico, se tomará el tema de la presencia y cómo hacer visible a las comunidades indígenas. Por otra parte, invitó a los compañeros del grupo parlamentario de Morena que se unieran en este esfuerzo y pues que es un privilegio el que ser parte de esta conversación. Espera que en el primer viaje que haya a Canadá con el grupo de amistad México-Canadá haya la oportunidad de que la delegación mexicana y particularmente él tenga la posibilidad de visitar la comunidad del jefe Matthew y ver de primera mano los resultados de estos trabajos. Perfecto.
Well done.
Muchas gracias.
Okay. Me gustaría, let me know if another participation,
Perdón?
de otra participación.
The floor is open for anybody who wants to share with us remarks or comments from the delegation. So maybe Frank.
Frank. Please, in Spanish.
Sí. Danse kakia kitata miskateinawa. Greetings to all of you, and thank you for hosting us in your beautiful city, in your beautiful country. The work that we are undertaking, we wish to be inclusive of peoples, of all peoples, because we only wish for you that which we wish for ourselves, and that's health, wealth, and prosperity. And if there are things that we can do to help bring that and share that with you, we are happy to explore any ways to do so. Thousands of years ago, our people traded all across Turtle Island. Where others want to build walls, we wish to open our arms to you. So gracias. Thank you for having me here.
Voy a empezar.
Un segundo, por favor.
Ok.
Un segundo, nada más, solo para traducir lo que dijo.
Adelante.
El Frank Bosch, que es miembro del Fondo de Infraestructura Indígena, que es miembro del Board of Directors, les da la más el más sentido agradecimiento de que nos hayan abierto las puertas. Comenta él de que es un privilegio el poder restablecer las rutas comerciales a lo largo de todo Norteamérica, en lo que hablan las culturas indígenas canadienses, la gran isla Tortuga. Norteamérica es la gran isla Tortuga. También menciona que es un privilegio ser parte de estos trabajos, que la idea es crear vínculos y no construcción de barreras. Y por esas circunstancias se siente muy, muy agradecido. Adelante, por favor.
Bien, gracias. Está con nosotros el diputado Murat, Eduardo Murat. Les da también la bienvenida. Welcome. Klaus Ritter, nuestro diputado de Morena, Klaus Ritter, compañero de nosotros. El diputado por Zacatecas, nuestro amigo del grupo parlamentario del PRD, Miguel Torres. Y nuestro compañero, el diputado Rendón, electo por Tamaulipas. Les agradecemos. La verdad es que su visita es muy oportuna, precisamente porque por primera vez en la historia se está invirtiendo en el sureste de México millones de pesos, el Tren Maya, el Transísmico, el aeropuerto de Tulum, son inversiones sin precedente. ¿Comentas? Para no hacerlo muy largo.
Perfecto. We would like to thank you, all of you. The timing is perfect. And it's perfect because right now the present government is spending money than before having been spent. in particular infrastructure projects, such as the Tren Maya, or the Mayan train, also the airport and the Tulum area. Adelante, por favor.
Y esta atención especial que está teniendo el presidente Obrador con el sureste de México coincide con el interés del Fondo de Infraestructura, especialmente en uno de los temas y después de la pandemia que hemos atravesado, que es precisamente los asuntos de salud a las zonas más distantes. Infraestructura hospitalaria urge en estas entidades, en el país en general. La agenda progresista de México sigue la agenda de Canadá. Lo primero que hizo el presidente de la República fue la salud universal, Healthcare for Everyone, en México, en la Constitución. Pausa.
Perfecto. I would like to say that the present administration is putting a particular effort and focus on the southeast area of Mexico City. Sorry, Mexico. Healthcare infrastructure is well needed. One of the first orders in business for the present administration was to make sure that it would be a constitutional priority for Mexican citizens to have access to universal healthcare.
Voy a dar la palabra a quien nos facilitó y ha hecho posible esta relación fraterna, que es nuestro presidente Alfredo Femat. Femat, cuando le comenté que venían nuestros Canadian Friends, de inmediato abrió las puertas de esta sala para que ustedes fuesen recibidos.
So I would like to ask to the chair of this committee, Deputy Fermat, to share with us some remarks. As soon as he learned about that this Canadian delegation was about to come to Canada, to Mexico, he was very welcoming and he was a key player in order to make happen this summit.
Una vez más, aprovecho para darle la bienvenida al jefe Matthews y a toda la delegación que lo acompaña. Agradezco la presencia de los compañeros legisladores mexicanos que están con nosotros.
So I would like to thank you, and also I would like to make sure that Kid Matthew knows that he's welcome in this for these works. Also, he is welcoming the members of the Chamber of Deputies who are joining us today. He feels grateful for that reason.
Realmente su visita va a ser muy importante, muy ilustrativa. En México aún tenemos un gran porcentaje de descendientes de los pueblos originarios y muchos de ellos, a diferencia de ustedes, aún todavía no tienen un estatus que deberían de tener en cuanto al reconocimiento que se les debe de dar, y por eso la experiencia con lo que ustedes están haciendo a través de este Fondo de Infraestructura será muy aleccionador.
I would like to say that we are we believe that this work will have good results. It happens that in Mexico, a substantial number of Mexicans have indigenous heritage, and he says that it would be something that we are working for in order than obtaining that status, in order to recognize the indigenous status for the people with that heritage.
A pesar de que se ha logrado incorporar a la Constitución política de los Estados Unidos mexicanos muchos de los derechos que deben de tener los descendientes de los pueblos originarios, hoy en día todavía las zonas más marginadas de este país tienen que ver con los lugares donde ellos viven y se desarrollan.
We have a lot of work to do. Nonetheless, we have recognized in the General Constitution of Mexico rights for people with indigenous heritage. Also is known that people from the poorest areas of Mexico, mainly they have also the indigenous heritage as well. So for that reason, it's a lot of work to do.
Los pueblos originarios en México siguen pidiendo un país de inclusión total, de respeto total, donde se entienda que ellos quieren preservar su cultura, su idioma, su forma de ver y creer el mundo, y que en ese sentido esperan que realmente tengan el estatus que otros pueblos originarios tienen en otros lares del mundo. Hace cerca de 20 días en Zacatecas fui invitado por descendientes de los pueblos originarios en mi estado, y yo les comentaba ya de esta reunión que íbamos a tener con ustedes y cómo pudiera ser una reunión que a nosotros nos dejara una gran experiencia para luego poder trabajar con ellos. Les comento que en el caso de Zacatecas no está en el sur del país, está en el centro norte, y por eso los beneficios que ahorita se están viendo son fundamentalmente para la parte sur del país, pero hay una gran cantidad de descendientes de pueblos originarios en el centro y en el norte del país.
Some of the work that has to be done, it would be considered, and also to recognize the respect, inclusion, and cultural dimension that people from original Mexicans, they are looking for to be recognized. Also, he says, and the deputy mentioned that he went to Zacatecas state, and is in the central north part of Mexico. And he was in a conversation with people with indigenous heritage there. And he was very pleased to inform about the meeting that was about to happen. Nonetheless, right now there are efforts in the southeast part of Mexico. Deputy Fermat also mentioned that we have presence of indigenous people all over the country, in the north and also northwest part of Mexico, and for that reason, he salutes and celebrates this mission.
Ellos comentaban en ese evento que según los datos que ellos manejan, el 20% aún de la población en México es de descendencia de pueblos originarios. Y en ese sentido se resisten a querer entrar a una modernidad que nada les dice. Y ellos insisten en que se respete su forma de ser, su forma de creer, sus formas de aprender y de convivir. Se han cansado ya de la discriminación que se les ha dado desde que este pueblo, este territorio fue conquistado por la corona española. Y por eso hoy para nosotros es importante conocer a fondo este mecanismo que ustedes han manejado, que le llaman Fondo de Infraestructura Crítica Indígena, porque a ustedes les ha dado autonomía y les ha dado capacidad para emprender una serie de proyectos en beneficio de los pueblos originarios en Canadá. Y por eso creo que esta va a ser una buena experiencia y un buen intercambio. Y esperamos, como bien lo dice el maestro Ildefonso, que en el próximo presupuesto el amor hacia los pueblos originarios en México se demuestre con una buena asignación presupuestal. Decimos, lo que no está en nómina o lo que no está en presupuesto no es amor. Gracias.
As a result of the conversation that our chair had 20 days ago with people from Zacatecas region, according to that people, over 20% of the Mexican population, they have some kind of indigenous content. One of the requests that work during that conversation is that they are asking in order that people, general population would be able to recognize their way of life, their creed, and also their cosmovision in order to understand that they have a different way of conceive life. He said that discrimination or differential treatment is happening nowadays, and we have a challenge, and we have work to do in that regards. Also, he celebrates that with this effort that we are having with the Indigenous Critical Infrastructure Fund, he would like to learn more about how Indigenous people from Canada is able to participate in economic development projects, and particularly how we would be able to benefit both sides of North America. And by the way, as he said, and he second what Mr. Ildefonso Guajardo said, that he's hoping that in this the budget that will be discussed during this this period, it will be a substantial budget part for the indigenous people in Mexico.
Very well. Déjenme el uso de la voz ahora para el diputado Eduardo Murat. He is elected from Oaxaca. So important for this plan. Okay?
I'm from Morelos, actually. I was born in Morelos, but my heart is in Oaxaca also. First of all, as my colleagues, I want to recognize your leadership. It's an honor to have you here in Congress in Mexico, and it is an honor to have you all here today. Thank you for making the trip, and thank you for being here today. I want to collect a couple of ideas that were said here today. One is environment. I think that this fund has the means to succeed because they have environment as one of the important concepts. I always say that the model of the three P's, profit, people, and planet, needs to be changed to planet, people, and profit. So that's why I think this fund is doing the right thing. The second idea is what Chief Matthew talked about. Private equities around the world have been really bad because of the management fees they collect and because of the 20% proceeds they collect. So if you guys are doing it differently, I think you're also in the right path. And the third idea is what Frank Bush said, and you too. You talked about inclusiveness, health, wealth, and prosperity, and of no borders for indigenous people in Turtle Island. I really believe that. Before the September 11 attacks, we were on the right path. It might sound utopic, but I thought that after NAFTA, borders would be eliminated. That could have happened in the 90s, but after the September 11 attacks, all the borders shrinked and we closed ourselves. So I celebrate that we are having this meeting today because this means that at least Canada, Mexico, and the United States are trying to find ways to continue our relationship in a globalized economy. And the last two concepts that I want to mention is the immigrants. As Chief Matthew mentioned, I think that we should explore visas for Mexican immigrants from indigenous communities to work in the United States and in Canada, and to have the opportunity to come back to their families. And the last concept is the power of economic reconciliation, as Congressman Ildefonso Guajardo said. If we do not put the money in front through budget, these are all ideas. So I think that the only way out of poverty and the only way out for the indigenous communities is through economic development. So I celebrate our meeting today. Thank you very much, and I hope we have this type of exchanges more often. Thank you very much.
Bien. Diputada.
No, nada más agradecerles la presencia y qué bueno que están aquí, qué bueno que estrechamos los lazos. Eso siempre
Solo para la versión estenográfica, discúlpanos. Sí, faltó la traducción.
Habla tan claro, Murat, que no se necesita.
El señor diputado de Murat comentaba que aun cuando él nació en Morelos, su corazón está con Oaxaca. Celebra esta reunión, particularmente por los temas que se han tratado el día de hoy. Comentaba, por ejemplo, que al día de hoy hay diferentes formas en las cuales se tiene jerarquización en proyectos. Inicialmente es ganancia, después es gente y planeta. El diputado Murat sugiere que cambiemos y considera que estamos en el camino correcto con este fondo, porque lo que se está privilegiando es a la gente, al planeta, a la gente, y quedando en tercer lugar lo que vendrán siendo ganancias. Comentó también de que celebra que este fondo de inversión esté haciendo algo distinto, porque uno de los impactos más fuertes que puede haber en cualquier fondo de inversión extranjera, fondo de inversión, es los honorarios o los gastos que erogan en la realización de los proyectos. El 20% que se cobra como producto de un proyecto resulta lesiona cualquier proyecto social. También el diputado Murat mencionó claramente y muy puntualmente de que esperemos que, aun cuando anteriormente en los 90s se esperaba con el Tratado de Libre Comercio el eliminar las barreras o las fronteras, al día de hoy desafortunadamente no es posible por los acontecimientos que todos conocemos del 2001, pero que celebra que se realicen estos trabajos aquí en México y en Canadá, e incluyendo también a los Estados Unidos, para que personas de origen indígena tengan la oportunidad de trabajar en cual comentó al final, pero no con menos importancia, y que secunda lo que comenta el señor diputado de Guajardo, de que con asignaciones presupuestales se pueden concretar proyectos, porque cuando desafortunadamente no hay presupuesto, queda únicamente en buenas ideas y buenas intenciones.
Bien. La diputada Ana Laura Huerta va a compartir un saludo.
Nada más agradecerles la presencia aquí en la Cámara de Diputados, decirles que es muy bueno que estrechemos los lazos, es muy bueno que trabajemos en común por lo que nosotros también pensamos que es importante ahorita, y pues bueno, pues que los trabajos empiecen y que sean de gran provecho para los dos países. Muchas gracias.
Bien. El diputado, por favor, pero traducción, ¿verdad?
Con mucho gusto.
Sorry.
The Congresswoman, Diputada Huerta, she celebrates and she welcomes all who are participating today. She says that it's great and we are able to start working together in two countries, and most importantly that we should show real results with work. So.
Listo. Diputado.
Chief Matthew, welcome to the Mexican Federal Congress. I'd also like to welcome all the Canadian delegation. Frank, thank you for your kind words. We really appreciate it. As Mexicans, we're fiercely proud of our mestizo heritage. And as my predecessors well said, you have to put the budget behind any action. But it's not only about budget. Mexico has done a lot. And as my fellow member of Congress also stated, we're currently investing strongly in the south of Mexico to develop it. We have to ensure that all Mexicans have the same opportunities, because in a country that is so rich, we have to make sure that those that were here at the beginning have their fair share of opportunities to basically lead a wealthy life and a privileged life. But it's not all about budget. It's also political. And Mexico has taken a huge step. As of this legislature, we are, through affirmative action, making sure that the representation of the indigenous populations are represented in this Congress. Through the lists of party representation, as of this Congress, all the parties have to include indigenous members in their party lists. So that way we're also not only pushing forward economic support, but also political support, and making sure that they have a voice in the House of Congress. And we're very proud of that. And we have to make sure that those affirmative actions continue, and we're also spreading them to other vulnerable groups. So welcome to Mexico. As you know, we're famous for our hospitality, and we're also very proud of our heritage. So I hope this visit isn't only work. Also, I hope you get to see the sights. There's a lot to see in Mexico City culturally. I hope you get to visit the museums, taste the food, and enjoy your stay. Thank you very much.
El señor diputado por el estado de Tamaulipas está de acuerdo con sus colegas que tuvieron la oportunidad de platicar antes con él, que es una situación esencial el tema del presupuesto, pero que también debe haber voluntad política. Se siente muy orgulloso de ser parte de esta legislatura, en esta legislatura en la cual la idea es poder el poder hacer clara la presencia de personas de origen indígena en cada una de las áreas que sean relevantes. Inclusive sugiere que cada una de las fuerzas políticas incluya dentro de sus... perfecto. Perdón. ¿Qué te parece si mejor lo dices en español?
No, de acuerdo a la legislación actual, la integración de esta Cámara de Diputados tiene ya un componente de acción afirmativa mediante el cual en nuestras listas de representación proporcional de cada partido político tenemos que incluir a personas indígenas. Entonces, con eso aseguramos que los pueblos originales y los pueblos indígenas tengan una voz en esta Cámara real, y no nada más una voz, un voto. Y eso es importantísimo para nosotros como mexicanos. Es algo que les podemos compartir como experiencia para ustedes, los canadienses, que puedan considerar como una medida de acción afirmativa. Porque no basta, como les decía, con el presupuesto, sino que lo tenemos que soportar con acciones políticas. Y este Congreso lo está haciendo, y estamos muy orgullosos de eso.
Muy bien. Traducción, Guillermo. ¿Traducción?
Pero ya había dicho eso.
¿Sí? Ok, no, pero precisiones. Puntual. Details.
No, he says that he's very proud of that this Congress has passed a law that mainly every group, parliamentary group, now has the obligation in order to include people who has indigenous heritage, and also this is the first time in history that this is happening. Money is important, but also the intention of political will, and also to making sure that people would have the decision, but most importantly would be heard, and also they would be able to take decisions through their representatives.
Nice try in the translation.
Muy bien, well done. Antes de terminar, tenemos dos participaciones más. De parte de la embajada está Lucy Ferro, y el diputado Klaus Ritter y el diputado Miguel Torres. Adelante, Lucy.
Muchas gracias. No voy a hablar mucho. Solamente para agradecerles por abrir su puerta. Es un placer para nosotros de estar aquí. Quisiera mencionar que estoy aquí con mucha humildad. Obviamente es la delegación del Chief Matthew que tiene el papel importante aquí. Solamente quisiera agradecerles otra vez y poner en enfoque en el papel importante del reconocimiento de los derechos de los pueblos originarios, están aquí en México y en Canadá. Canadá está comprometido en el apoyo en sus pueblos indígenas, y estas delegaciones, como la delegación que estamos acompañando aquí, es un paso importante para nosotros. Chief Matthew, muchas gracias por su visita aquí en México. Es un placer para nosotros apoyarte. I will complete by saying thank you very much, Chief Matthew. It's a pleasure to be here. It's been thank you for your great speech. It's been very important for us to share this moment and be here with you today. Thank you.
Muy bien. Gracias. Thank you so much, Lucy. Diputado Klaus Ritter, por favor.
Thank you, Chief Matthew, to all the delegations. We are pleased that you are here with us. I don't know if my English is quite as clear or good as my colleagues, but I will try to speak really quick. First, I want to say one thing. I'm really impressed about the ICIF. I think it's a really important initiative. And the second thing that I want to talk with you, it's the importance of the indigenous people in the fight against climate change. Here in Mexico, nearly 80% of indigenous people, no, I'm sorry, the indigenous people protect nearly 80% of the environmental issues here in Mexico. I don't know the percentage of Canada, but I do believe that it's really important that we should talk and we should protect our indigenous people and give them more recognition in our laws. If I'm not mistaken, in 2 years ago, we include in the general law of climate change here in Mexico the indigenous people so they can have more money to protect the environmental issues. So I want to thank you all. Thank you also to my friend Diputado Robledo, and welcome to Mexico.
Español.
Muchas gracias, jefe Matthew, gracias a toda la delegación el día de hoy por participar con nosotros. Es un privilegio. Queda gratamente impresionado respecto a esta iniciativa del Fondo de Infraestructura Indígena. Comentó el señor diputado de que uno de los grandes retos que tienen comunidades indígenas en nuestro país, en México, es tema de problemas del medio ambiente, ¿es correcto? Y por esa circunstancia es el trabajo que se tiene que realizar, celebra el que podamos trabajar de forma conjunta y perdón si se me pasó algo más que te gustaría que...
Simplemente que podamos tener más reuniones como esta.
Porque por la importancia que tiene la gente, el pueblo indígena en la protección del medio ambiente, tanto en Canadá, me imagino, como aquí en nuestro país, México.
Va el diputado Miguel, pero se quiere despedir el diputado y darnos una despedida al diputado Ildefonso.
Una disculpa porque we have the Economic Committee and we have to fight for an initiative that is going to protect indigenous rights. So, but before I leave, let me congratulate you for the beautiful, we say penacho. How do you call it? Headdress? We call it penacho in Spanish. But one advice, don't leave it out of sight because Austrians like them a lot.
Thank you, Ildefonso. Diputado, por favor, Miguel Torres.
Muchas gracias, diputado Alejandro. Decirle al jefe Matthew y a toda la delegación canadiense que es un honor tenerlos aquí en la Cámara de Diputados, que el conocer el Fondo de Infraestructura que ustedes manejan, sin duda que contribuye al desarrollo de las comunidades indígenas. Yo deseo que ese fondo pueda también en algún momento ayudar a las comunidades indígenas en nuestro país que tienen carencia de servicios como agua potable, como drenaje, como pavimentación de caminos. Si me lo permiten, déjenme trato de decírselos en inglés.
Go ahead.
Tengo 16 años que no lo hablo, sí, pero escuchándolos como que ya me estoy acordando. Sí, it's Chief Matthew and all the Canadian delegation. It's an honor to have you here in the Chamber of Deputies. We recognize your leadership, your job, your effort to improve the general condition of indigenous people, and I hope the ICIF could help to indigenous people of our country. You're welcome. I hope we could have many meetings like this here or in Canada. We're ready to go over there, to go to know your country. And I repeat, it's an honor to have you. You're welcome to Mexico.
Okay. Bueno, vamos a conferencia, press conference, pero quiero decirles muchas gracias por estar aquí y tenemos especial inversión para los pueblos indígenas, Sembrando Vida, Soul Life, ¿no? Andrés Manuel López Obrador propuso Sembrando Vida y mensualmente entrega a farmers alrededor de 5,000 pesos. Es un importante programa, Sembrando Vida, que incluso Canadá y Estados Unidos invirtieron ya en sembrando oportunidades más allá de México y del sureste mexicano, sino también incluye a Centroamérica. Entonces, es tiempo de las minorías, es tiempo de los indígenas, especialmente en México. The Fourth Transformation la cuarta transformación está poniendo adelante a la gente. De hecho, the Fourth Transformation follow the Canadian agenda. Tenemos, let me context, tenemos right now the discussion, the energetic resources, but also we are in the middle of the election. Like Canadá cuando llaman a elección, right now nuestro proceso se llama revocación de mandato. Next April 10 is our election to know if López Obrador remain in the position or bye-bye a López Obrador. Naturally, for us, say keep going, for transformation ongoing. Muchas gracias por estar aquí. Que siga la cuarta transformación, es lo que estamos diciendo nosotros en el país de cara a esta elección, porque queremos que los indígenas, los inmigrantes estemos al frente. Comunidad LGBT, yo disfruté los the parade, LGBT Pride Parade en Toronto, amazing. Even Justin Trudeau in front, estaba ahí. Entonces, tenemos mucho más en común México y Canadá que Estados Unidos y México, o más bien queremos seguir más la agenda progresista de Canadá. Muchas gracias. Vamos.